When it comes to the Star Wars universe, there are a multitude of different concepts and ideas that prove analogous to aspects of our own history. Some of these similarities are easier to observe than others. However, the most prominent are those relating to governmental systems and ideology. One of the more famous analogues in this regard is the Galactic Empire's basis on the German Reich leading up to and during the Second World War. During the original trilogy, the Empire is definitively shown as the bad guy, the evil which must be defeated to bring balance to the galaxy. When asking the question of why the Galactic Empire makes such an effective antagonist, the answer lies in the real regime on which it was based. Nazi Germany has gone down in history as a dictatorship bent on subjugating the world according to its ideals. Ideals of discrimination, militarism, and despotism ran rampant throughout its ranks. Genocide, forced displacement, and political repression are all things that have contributed to the Third Reich's firm placement on the villainous side of history. The Second World War itself is often characterized as a righteous struggle between good and evil, largely due to how well the Nazis personified our perception of objective immorality. With that being said, almost all of these ideals can be attributed to the Galactic Empire in some way. An example of this is the Empire's prosecution and subsequent extermination of the Jedi, or alternatively, the discrimination against non-humans found in the Empire's numerous institutions. Everything down to the way Imperials dress evokes imagery of totalitarian states from history, a signature look of superiority found in their elegant attire. Other ideas such as the Death Star may have even originated from the concept of Wunderwaffen, or theoretical Nazi superweapons intended on changing the course of World War II. While that may seem like a stretch, one cannot help but compare the Nazis' hypothetical orbital death ray to that of the Empire's battle station. Stormtroopers are another clear example of the Empire's historical inspiration, being based off of Imperial Germany's World War I shock troops and the Nazis' early paramilitary forces. All in all, it is clear that when George Lucas created the antagonistic regime of his space opera, he needed it to be an organization that truly felt evil. One that, whether the audiences of 1977 consciously knew it or not, shared many aspects with the real evil from over 3 decades earlier. All of this likeness culminated in the Galactic Empire being seen as one of fiction's most iconic bad guys, and subsequently made the plot of the original trilogy a very clear fight between good and evil, similar to how the Second World War is viewed. Keeping with the topic of governmental analogues in Star Wars, the Galactic Republic is the next logical step in examining similarities. The Republic has a handful of real-world inspirations, which from a viewer standpoint makes it seem relatively complex compared to the Empire's straightforward basis on dictatorships like Nazi Germany. This implied complexity within the Republic is essential for how George Lucas wanted to portray an unstable democracy. An unstable democracy that could be exploited by a scheming political savant. There are 3 main analogues for the Galactic Republic that I will discuss to help explain how Lucas molded this fictional government. The first of those being the ancient Roman Republic. When it comes to the Roman Republic, its similar qualities range from its prominent senatorial system to the fact that the Romans dominated much of the known world during their time, similar to how the Galactic Republic controlled most of known space for thousands of years. The early Republic in Star Wars is said to have originated from a handful of important worlds within the galactic core. Chief among these was the political and economic capital of Coruscant, a world that may very well have taken inspiration from the city of Rome itself, from which the Roman Republic would blossom, similar to how the Galactic Republic quickly spread from the core worlds. Even the phrase "all roads lead to Rome" rings true in regard to the galactic capital, as many key hyperlanes connect Coruscant to the rest of the galaxy. Another perhaps more important aspect of the Romans in relation to Star Wars is their Senate. It is apparent that the Galactic Senate took some inspiration from Rome in how it looks and operates. However, what is more important to point out is how the Roman Senate continued to exist after the Roman Republic was reformed into the Roman Empire. During this new empire, the role of the Senate was greatly reduced, as Emperor Augustus had obtained near full control of the organization, and had it instate him as the lifelong commander and chief of Rome's military legions. This political shift aligns very heavily with what we see in the prequel trilogy, that being a Senate whose significance is slowly whittled away in favor of empowering a single office. The second analogy for the Galactic Republic I'd like to examine is the Weimar Republic in Germany during the interwar years. This is an important one to discuss as it ties directly back into how the Empire is based on the Third Reich. After the First World War and the subsequent November Revolution, the old monarchy in Germany was abolished. This made way for the Weimar Republic. The story of this nation in its entirety shares some strong aspects with the story of the Galactic Republic in its later years. After the First World War, Germany was forced to pay massive war reparations to the Allied powers, which put the new Weimar Republic into massive financial debt throughout its existence. This rough start meant that the Republic was plagued by instability and political violence, resulting in the initial rise of the Nazi Party and Adolf Hitler. While the exact situation of Germany at this time doesn't make the best comparison for the Galactic Republic, the way Hitler used his nation's situation to manipulate his way into dictatorship certainly does. When the Weimar Republic entered the Great Depression in 1929, much of the stability it had gained began to disappear. The economic and political uncertainty of this time enabled Hitler and his Nazi Party to begin the final stages of their takeover within the German government. The most important moment of this takeover in regards to this comparison is when Hitler was appointed Chancellor in January of 1933. Hitler completely transformed the Chancellery. He used a fire at the German Parliament building as a casus belli to wipe out his political enemies and grant his office emergency powers. Shortly after this, the Enabling Act of March 1933 was passed by Parliament, effectively giving Hitler complete control over all legislative decisions. By this time, the Parliament had been purged, and what seats remained consisted of Nazis or representatives under their influence. In the span of a few months, Germany had transformed from a representative democracy into a fascist dictatorship. It is very important to recognize that this transition did not actually take a mere 3 months. In reality, it was the result of a meticulous decade-long scheme. Hitler had already attempted a coup d'etat in 1923, which ended up failing in a violent and bloody fashion. After his subsequent stint in prison, he developed a new doctrine for obtaining power in Germany, a doctrine that would involve political manipulation and public indoctrination rather than brute force. For the next 10 years, the Nazis would slowly gain prominence and put the pieces into place for their eventual domination of German politics. By now it is clear to see how many elements of this directly relate to how Sheev Palpatine rose to power. Whether it be his orchestration of the Naboo crisis, during which he was appointed Chancellor, or his complete manipulation of the Clone Wars to gain emergency powers, Palpatine planned his rise to power for many years, choosing to be patient and use a variety of situations to slowly gain complete control. This can be compared to Hitler's choice to play the long game in 1923. The Weimar Republic's influence on the Galactic Republic has roots in George Lucas's belief that democracies aren't ever truly conquered or defeated outright. Rather, they're given away by their own people, whether it's through manipulation, desperation, or a mix of both. The final analog I'd like to discuss for the Republic is the United States of America. The US, being a modern-day representative democracy, gives vital insight into how George Lucas designed the Galactic Republic. For one, the individual states within the Union can be compared to the different planets or sectors represented within the Republic Senate. This structure is important, as it directly ties into the bureaucratic corruption we see in the prequel trilogy. This corruption took place because of senators acting in their own personal interest rather than that of their planets, and due to the growing influence of megacorporations within the Republic Senate, this corruption became even more widespread. The biggest real-world analog for this situation is lobbying, particularly lobbying on the part of large corporations or military contractors. In Star Wars, the prevalence of megacorporations and the senators that supported them paved the way for the Clone Wars to begin, as certain trade tariffs pushed the corporations and their allies within the Senate towards secession. The idea of secession relating to tariffs and other economic sanctions is one taken from the American Civil War, during which tariffs on imported goods severely threatened the South and its economy. Speaking of the South, the Confederate States of America is a clear inspiration for the Confederacy of Independent Systems, both for the reason I just mentioned and the simple fact that it's a government that seeks a form of decentralized administration for the galaxy. This obviously means that the Galactic Republic represents the role of the Union during the war, that being a centralized and established government fighting an opposite version of itself. Another parallel with the Union is the Clone Army, which is referred to as the Grand Army of the Republic, which was a fraternal organization in our world that was composed of Civil War veterans. One last point to touch on here is how Lucas based the Republic and its inner workings on certain political scandals that occurred throughout the late 20th century. Think Richard Nixon and the Watergate scandal. In fact, Nixon was a huge influence on the making of Star Wars as a whole. His handling of the Vietnam War was largely seen as an unneeded escalation of the conflict built on broken promises and lies. Overall, the idea of American imperialism is integral to the message Lucas wanted to convey throughout his saga. At the end of the day, Star Wars is an accumulation of one man's ideas regarding democracy and how it can be twisted into something completely different. Intertwined with this are ideas of hope, a message that reminds us that it's never too late to take democracy back from those who manipulated it into their grasp.